Okay, so we're continuing on with chapter 2b in Works of Love. Title of this chapter is You Shall Love Your Neighbor, with neighbor being emphasized. So he's going to really focus on that aspect of that command. First paragraph starts off, it is in fact Christian love which discovers and knows that one's neighbor exists and that it is one and the same thing. Everyone is one's neighbor. If it were not a duty to love, then there would be no concept of neighbor at all. But only when one loves his neighbor, only then is the selfishness of preferential love rooted out in the equality of the eternal preserved. So yeah, he says that it's Christian love which actually discovers the neighbor and knows that the neighbor exists. People often mistakenly believe that other religions teach the love of neighbor the way Christianity does, but this is not true. Eastern thinking, different types of Vedanta and Buddhism, teach non-attachment to all that is earthly. The earthly is often considered illusion. You're never to attach oneself to another in any serious way through love, because this attachment will lead to future rebirths, which is to be avoided if one ever wants to achieve liberation, referred to as moksha or nirvana. Other religions, Islam, for example, also does not teach love of neighbor. I have two verses here from, one from the Quran, one from the Hadith. So, Surah 929 in the Quran. This is the Yusuf Ali translation. Fight those who believe not in Allah, nor the last day, nor hold that forbidden which has been forbidden by Allah and His Messenger, nor acknowledge the religion of truth, even if they are people of the book, until they pay the jizya with willing submission and feel themselves subdued. So yeah, here in the Quran, clear example of, waging war against those who do not believe the same way Muslims do, even if they're people of the book, which are often given some exceptions. Even the people of the book have to pay the jizya tax and feel themselves subdued. The next verse is a hadith, which is hadiths are accounts of things that Muhammad actually did. Some are considered more authentic than others. The Sahih hadiths are considered the most authentic, and they're authoritative in regards to Islamic law. And so this is one of the Sahih hadiths for the Sunnis. The Sunni and the Shia have different hadiths. This is Sunni hadith. Quote, Allah's apostle said, quote, I've been ordered to fight the people till they say, quote, none has the right to be worshipped but Allah, unquote. And if they say so, pray like our prayers, face our Qibla, and slaughter as we slaughter, then their blood and property will be sacred to us, and we will not interfere with them except legally, and their reckoning will be with Allah, unquote. So yeah, you see another example where love of neighbor is clearly not present. Even though the commandment to, quote, love your neighbor as yourself is found in the law of Moses, it actually comes from Leviticus 19:18. Judaism also tended to overlook this command and have an ideology of love towards fellow Jews only, whether in blood or religion, which is why Jesus on the Sermon on the Mount referred to those who have said, quote, you shall love your friend and hate your enemy. It's kind of ambiguous where this actually comes from. We don't really have certainty. It could have just been something that sprang up, amongst, we don't really know. It could be amongst the Jews. It could have been amongst the pagans. It's just, this is the most common human feeling in regards to these things. There are statements in the Old Testament that could give this implication, like statements King David made in the Psalms, referring to those who hate God. And David said about them, quote, I hate them with complete hatred. I count them my enemies. There could have also just been a general attitude of hostility towards surrounding nations because of things we see in like the conquest of Canaan found in Joshua and other battles that occurred over the land of Israel. The Apostle Paul also says that the wall of hostility between Jew and Gentile was actually contained in the law of Moses. There's all these things separating the Jews from everyone else. Though if they were actually obeying those dietary laws and the other ceremonial laws, it would greatly alienate them from surrounding nations, and which could have been actually one of the reasons it was given. But generally, it could lead to just this general separation between them. And Paul did say, through Christ, that wall of hostility is actually broken down. So yeah, there was also, and there can be, and this isn't to put this on every single person of that tradition, but there does grow up a certain hostility in that system. One of the Jewish lawyers who questioned Jesus about the greatest commandment, after being told by Jesus that the greatest commandment was to love God and their neighbor as themselves, asked Jesus, quote, "Who is my neighbor?" implying that they made a distinction between Jew and non-Jew where Jesus did not. And this is shown in the story of the Good Samaritan that Jesus gave after that question. This sort of attitude is confirmed in a commentary called The Laws of Murderers and the Protection of Life by Maimonides, one of the most respected rabbis in history. In it, he says, he's giving commentary on different verses. He says, quote, "With regard to a Gentile idolater with whom we are not at war, a Jewish shepherd of a small livestock, and the like, by contrast, we should not try to cause their deaths. It is, however, forbidden to save their lives if their lives are threatened. For example, if such a person fell into the sea, one should not rescue him. Leviticus 19:16 states, quote, 'Do not stand idly by while your brother's blood is at stake,' unquote. This does not apply with regard to such individuals, because they are not your brothers." So we see here in this very well-respected rabbi and scholar, in his commentary, he's talking about, Leviticus 19:16 states, "You shall not stand idly by while your brother's neighbor, or while your brother's blood is at stake," which generally just means you don't give false testimony against them, or you don't let them, when there's something you can do to preserve their lives, you should do what you can to save them. And he's saying if someone like this, like a Gentile idolater, for example, falls into the sea, you shouldn't rescue him, because he says that this does not apply to them because they're not your brothers. And so we do see that there are traditions like this. Once again, not to paint with a broad brush on everyone in this tradition, but this is common. Yeah, if it were not a duty to love, then there would be no concept of neighbor at all. When we only love preferentially, then we do not love everyone, but only those we find lovely in some way. If this is the case, then we will not love our neighbor. So he goes on, this is page 59. Erotic love and friendship are related to passion. But all passion, whether it attacks or defends itself, fights in one manner only. Either or. Either I exist and I am the highest, or I do not exist at all. Either all or nothing. So yeah, I think he's just saying whether it's like a best friend or whether it's a romantic love, it's like we have this desire to just be the highest. It's like I'm either like the best friend or I am the beloved of the one I love. And he's saying like we don't want anything less than that. Love to one's neighbor is not to be sung about. It is to be fulfilled in reality. Even if there were nothing else to hinder the poet from artistically celebrating love to one's neighbor in song, it is quite enough that, with invisible letters behind every word in the Holy Scriptures, a disturbing notice confronts him, for there it reads, "Go and do likewise." Does this sound like an artistic challenge, inviting him to sing? Romantic love is sung about because it does not require anything but the natural sensual impulse that is gratifying to ourselves. Go and do likewise. When Jesus tells whenever the I don't know, I think it was like a lawyer or something asked Jesus who his neighbor was. Jesus gave this story of the, I think this comes from when he says, I think it's the story of the Good Samaritan. Yeah, it's the story of the Good Samaritan. When he tells the story of the Good Samaritan, Jesus says, "Who was a neighbor to the man who fell among thieves?" And he answered, "The one who showed compassion to him." I think like the lawyer or whatever said, the one who showed compassion to him was a neighbor. And Jesus says, "Go and do likewise." And Kierkegaard's saying here, this is a call to duty, to love those around us. And this is burdensome to us, something that does not compel the artist to sing about this type of love in song. We only tend to praise that love that comes easily to us and does not require anything of us at all. Certainly not a love that we must carry out as duty to a higher authority. That's not the sort of love the poet wants to sing about. Erotic love is based on disposition, which, explained as inclination, has its highest, its unconditional, artistically unconditional, unique expression, and that there is only one beloved in the whole world, and that only this one time of erotic love is genuine love, and that only this one time of erotic love is genuine love, is everything, and the next time nothing. Usually one says proverbially that the first try does not count. Here, on the other hand, the one time is unconditionally the whole. The next time is unconditionally the ruin of everything. This is poesy, and the emphasis rests decisively in the highest expression of passionateness. To be or not to be. To love a second time is not really love. And to poetry, this is an abomination. We have this notion that there is only one true beloved and that all other loves are nothing in comparison. The idea that there is a soulmate somewhere that is your other half for all eternity influences feelings like this. Biblically, we know that this is not true because Christ said that there is no marriage in the age to come. That's Luke 20, verses 34 to 36. Also, how many times have we fallen in love? What are we to make of this feeling? Does it represent truth or sensual desire and the infatuation with beauty? Because and here he's saying, it's just like that one time with that one person, and that's everything, and nothing else after that means anything. Because I think there's this idea of like the eternal soulmate, right? Which Christ shuts down the idea because in eternity there's no marriage. The poet and Christianity give explanations which are quite opposed. Or more accurately expressed, the poet really explains nothing, for he explains love and friendship in riddles. He explains love and friendship as riddles, but Christianity explains love eternal. From this, one again sees that it is an impossibility to love according to both explanations simultaneously, for the greatest possible contradiction between the two explanations is this, that the one is no explanation at all, and the other is the explanation. As the poet understands them, love and friendship contain no ethical task. Love and friendship are good fortune. Poetically understood, and certainly the poet is an excellent judge of fortune, it is good fortune, the highest good fortune, to fall in love, to find the one and only beloved. It is good fortune, almost as great, to find the one and only friend. Then the highest task is to be properly grateful for one's good fortune. But the task can never be an obligation to find the beloved or to find the friend. This is out of the question, something the poet well understands. Finding romantic love or a best friend is seen as good fortune, but never contains any ethical obligation to love. This obligation to love is foreign to the poet because it makes love lose all of its mystique. The point at issue between the poet and Christianity may be stated precisely in this way. Erotic love and friendship are preferential, and the passion of preference. Christian love is self-renunciation's love, and therefore trusts in this shall. To exhaust these passions would make one's head swim. But the most passionate boundlessness of preference, in excluding others, is to love only the one and only. Self-renunciation's boundlessness in giving itself is not to exclude a single one. Romantic love and friendship are us loving those who we prefer to love, while Christian love commands us to love those who we do not want to love, and therefore requires us to deny our desires and obey God. The height of preferential love is to love only one and to exclude all others, while the height of Christian love is to love all and exclude nobody. Sensuality, the flesh, Christianity understands as selfishness. No conflict between body and spirit can be imagined unless there is a rebellious spirit on the side of the body with which the spirit then struggles. In the same way, no conflict can be thought of as existing between spirit and a stone, between spirit and a tree. Therefore, self-love, egocentricity, is sensuality. Consequently, Christianity has misgivings about erotic love and friendship because preference and passion, or passionate preference, is really another form of self-love. Paganism had never dreamed of this because paganism never had an inkling of self-renunciation's love of one's neighbor, whom one shall love. It therefore reckoned thus: self-love is abhorrent because it is love of self, but erotic love and friendship, which are passionate preferences for other people, are genuine love. But Christianity, which has made manifest what love is, reckons otherwise. Self-love and passionate preference are essentially the same. But love of one's neighbor, that is genuine love. To love the beloved, asks Christianity, is that loving? And adds, do not the pagans do likewise? Sensuality is not physical intimacy with a spouse, nor is it the enjoyment of food or other natural desires that God made us to have. But sensuality is selfishness. It is egocentrism. Christianity distrusts any love that is preferential. Sorry, I made a little grammatical error there. Christianity distrusts any love that is preferential, whether it is romantic love or friendships, because it is ultimately rooted in us loving ourselves, because we are loving those we admire or who are like us. Paganism, or anything non-Judeo-Christian, glorifies romantic love and friendship because it falsely assumes that such loves... Paganism glorified romantic love and friendships because it falsely assumed that such loves were not self-love. But Christ exposed to mankind their sinful self-centeredness when he commanded love of neighbor, showing the world what true love is and exposing our preferential love as actually being love for ourselves. Jesus showed that preferential love is not special, asking, quote, do not the pagans do likewise? When he's saying, if you love those who love you, what more are you doing than others? Do not the pagans also do that? And when we're actually loving the beloved, or the best friend or whatever, we're loving them as they love us. And as will come up later, he'll talk about how our love for them can change whenever they're not loving us back, which further exposes that it's actually self-love. If passionate preference is essentially another form of self-love, one again sees the truth in the saying of the worthy father, quote, the virtues of paganism are glittering vices. Yeah, I think that comes from Augustine. And he's just saying, they glorified this, when paganism glorified romantic love or friendship, he's saying it's just a glittering vice because it's actually love of self. You're still not loving everyone. You're not loving the neighbor. The beloved and the friend are therefore called remarkably and significantly enough the other self and the other I, for one's neighbor is the other you, or more accurately, the third man of equality. The other self, the other I, but wherein lies self-love? It lies in the I, in the self. Would not self-love, then, still remain in loving the other self, the other I? People often refer to their beloved or best friend as their other self or other I, or something similar, revealing that self-love is present in the love of this other person, and it is not as selfless as we think it is. Only Christianity sees as self-love the devotion of the lover's surrender to the one and only, whereby the beloved is held firmly. How can devotion and boundless abandon be self-love? Indeed, when it is devotion to the other I, or the other myself. This devotion and boundless abandon shown to this beloved person is in fact devotion and boundless abandon to your other self. It is devotion and boundless abandon to yourself. Consequently, there must be admiration in erotic love's relationship. And the greater, the more intense the admiration is, the better, says the poet. Now, to admire another person certainly is not self-love, but to be loved by the other one and only object of admiration. Must not this relationship turn back in a selfish way to the I which loves its other I? So here he's saying simply admiring a person is not self-love. But when we are loved by the one and only object of our admiration, we can begin to see the self-love in this arrangement. What happens if this object of admiration does not love us in return? Love of one's neighbor, on the other hand, is self-renouncing love. And self-renunciation casts out all preferential love, just as it casts out all self-love. Otherwise, self-renunciation would also make distinctions and would nourish preference for preference. If passionate preference had no other selfishness about it, it would still have this, that consciously or unconsciously there is a willfulness about it. Unconsciously, insofar as it is in the power of the natural predispositions. Consciously, insofar as it utterly surrenders itself to this power and consents to it. True love renounces its own desires, its preferential love, and loves everyone. Christianity is about self-denial and obeying God's commands, even if they are opposed to our selfish, sinful nature. When the lover or the friend can love only this one person in the whole world, something delightful to the poet's ears, there is in this tremendous devotion a tremendous willfulness, and the lover in this onrushing, inordinate devotion really relates himself to himself in self-love. Self-renunciation would eradicate this self-loving and self-willing by the you shall of the eternal. Wherever Christianity is, there is also self-renunciation, which is Christianity's essential form. In order to be related to Christianity, one must first and foremost become sober. But self-renunciation is precisely the way by which a human being becomes sober in an eternal sense. On the other hand, wherever Christianity is absent, the intoxication of self-feeling is the most intense, and the height of this intoxication is most admired. When we are following Christ's command to deny ourselves, we are becoming serious in regard to eternity, because ultimately we are nothing apart from God and must learn this subjection in order to be living in the truth. When this self-denial is absent, we are consumed by our inclinations, which are not in alignment with truth, and this causes us to not be in the right relationship to God. The beloved whom he loves as himself is not his neighbor. The beloved is his other eye. So yeah, there it's, we're called to love our neighbor. And he's saying, the one who, beloved, when someone's loving their beloved, he's not actually loving them as his neighbor. He's actually loving his other eye, and he's loving himself. Just as self-love in the strictest sense has been characterized as self-deification, so love and friendship, as the poet understands it, and with his understanding this love stands and falls, he says it's essentially idolatry. So he says, just as self-love in the strictest sense has been characterized as self-deification, so love and friendship are essentially idolatry. Self-love is self-deification, and romantic love and friendship, when they are forms of loving yourself, are no different. Therefore, they are all forms of idolatry, the worship of something other than God. Man left God out. Men considered erotic love and friendship to be love and shunned self-love. But the Christian love command requires one to love God above all else, then to love one's neighbor. Only by loving God above all else can one love his neighbor in the next human being. Christianity is certainly the highest and the supremely highest, but mark well, to the natural man it is an offense. He who in describing Christianity as the highest omits the middle term, offense, sins against it. Christianity is in itself, so some of these sentences don't immediately follow each other. There's just like a whole bunch of them just going through, and I'll describe what I think he's getting at. Christianity in itself is too profound, and its movements too serious for dancing and skipping in such freewheeling frivolity of talk about the higher, the highest, the supremely highest. Through offense goes the way to Christianity. If you think to come closer to this highest by help of education, you make a great mistake. Christianity is by no means the highest of education, and Christianity disciplines precisely by this repulsion of offense. This you can easily see, for do you believe that your education or the enthusiasm of any man for gaining an education has taught either you this you can easily see, for do you believe that your education or the enthusiasm of any man for gaining an education has taught either of you to love your neighbor? And so here he says Christianity is certainly the highest in a moral and spiritual sense, but this is not how we come to believe in the truth of Christianity. We come to the truth by being offended at what it teaches about us, about mankind. Through being offended, we can either accept or reject what it says about what our true condition is. If we accept it, we can see the hard truth about our sinfulness and begin the path of becoming like the Son of God. In the last sentence of the chapter, he says, "He is your neighbor on the basis of equality with you before God." But this equality absolutely every man has, and he has it absolutely. And so here we are to treat everyone with love and respect. We love our neighbor because we are all created equal before God. This does not imply that we are all in right standing with God or that everyone will be saved, but that God has offered to us, but what God has offered to us and how he has changed us who believe, the same thing is available to everyone. And it's on the basis of this equality that we are called to love our neighbor. We're called to love everyone as ourselves.